Welcome to the Ultimate Heartless Ranking Project, where we believe every enemy deserves its 15 seconds in the spotlight. The Heartless of Kingdom Hearts 2 are an odd breed, often overshadowed and overdusked by the Nobody's otherworldly outfit, but today we're going to give them the attention they deserve and pay tribute to each and every lost soul in the Heartless army. That said, there's some Heartless that look a lot better when tasting the teeth of a Keyblade, so let's pull up the tier list. You can check the KH1 video for a lengthy explanation of the ranking system, but here's the quick version. Heartless are largely graded on visual design and gameplay elements, but will usually go higher on the tier list if they have some kind of interesting history or story significance. I place heavy value on theming with Disney World, unique gimmicks, and synergy with other Heartless. Anything A tier and up I consider a success. Anything D tier and down is in need of a rework, and the B and C tiers are on a gradient from appreciate to tolerate. The lower division of C tier is the baseline for a passing grade. Last summer, we ranked every Heartless introduced in the original Kingdom Hearts and most of their descendants from later games. There are 7 KH2 enemies already on the tier list, but it's not off to a great start. 3 of them were new children in the so-called Prismatic Melody Heartless family, which ranged from decent to detestable. 1 was the Luna Bandit, which I ranked as fairly average, and 2 were Final Mix exclusive Cavern of Remembrance reskins, which sat firmly in D tier. And the highest ranking KH2 Heartless was a scrapped recolor that doesn't even appear in the game. We can only hope that KH2's original designs are stronger than its KH1 derivatives. But before we can answer that, we need to take a quick detour to rank the Heartless introduced in the second Kingdom Hearts game.
When the Heartless came, everything changed.
There are only 3 new Heartless introduced in Chain of Memories. The Creeper Plant is the first of these. This Heartless stays rooted in place, attacking from afar with seed projectiles or burrowing roots. They're good at causing a disruption when they're in the back of a large group of Heartless, but are pretty weak when confronted head-on. It's always amusing to uproot a creeper plant and watch it flop uselessly on the ground. Their burrowing root needle attack is vile in Com and Recom, especially given their unusually high-valued cards, so that's going to knock them down a peg. Still, I consider the creeper plant a decent and understated Heartless. Low B tier. The Dire Plant replaces the creeper plant in Days, and it is an exceptionally bland Heartless. It only has a single projectile attack, but at least it can be reflected back to deal some damage. It's also the only Heartless to appropriately take advantage of the flower element, but I'd rather fight the creeper plants or one of the later siblings than this dire excuse for a Heartless. D tier. After swapping out one letter, we have our next Heartless, the Fire Plant. It's a plant, it has a single bouncing fireball attack, and has an 8 times weakness to Blizzard. Not a poorly designed enemy, but not a particularly noteworthy one either. Low C tier. I have the exact same feelings about the Ice Plant. The only interesting thing is that in Days, it was called the Blizzard Plant in all regions, one of the rare instances where the Japanese name changed in addition to the English one, but it can sit next to its fiery counterpart in low C tier. You won't believe this, but the Poison Plant is a plant that attacks with poison. When we're just swapping out different elements over the same Heartless template, there reaches a point where I run out of insightful commentary. Bottom of C tier. Kingdom Hearts Key continues this trend with the Dark Plant. Wow. It's really just a replacement for the Poison Plant, given that its attacks can inflict the poison status. The only upside is that it fixed the color scheme. The original Poison Plant looked too similar to Dire and Fire, while the Dark Plant's design better conveys the idea of poison. Still, low C tier. Finally, a Heartless that I actually have something to say about, the Red Rose and its sister, the White Rose. In Union Cross, and especially Dark Road, these two are associated with Wonderland. This fits in great with the world's Rose Garden, and if you remember from part 1, I'm a sucker for Heartless whose designs take inspiration from the Disney worlds they appear in. Just imagine if we fought these in the Garden Maze instead of a half-dozen soldier reskins in Days. Anyway, this makes the Rose Twins the most interesting members of the Creeper Plant family. Low B tier for the both of them. Last time, we covered several Heartless pairs that were introduced on Valentine's Day and White Day, and the next installment in this line comes in the form of the Creeper Bouquet and Prank Bouquet. I find the idea of a creeper plant stuffed into a nosegay to be quite charming, and the Prank Bouquet's blue roses are a nice contrast, so both of these can settle down just above the median, high C tier. Related by name only, it's the Mischief Bouquet, made for the 5th anniversary of Kingdom Hearts Union Cross. When ranking event-only enemies with no story significance, the design has to do the heavy lifting, and the Mischief Bouquet delivers. A lot of the Heartless added later in Union Cross's lifecycle are more interesting and involved than the frequent palette swaps of the early years. I like how you can see the eyes of the shadows lying in wait beneath the flowers, and it's overall just pleasing to look at. Low B tier. I think I'm in the minority when I say that I'm a big fan of the Loudmouth. Known as the Crescendo prior to Days, this Heartless plays support for its allies. It can heal its compatriots and, in Common Cage 2, summon new Heartless to the field, one of the only non-boss Heartless to possess this ability. While other healers like the Green Requiem are pacifists, the Loudmouth also has some basic offensive capabilities. In KH2, it also has a neat reaction command which lets you squeeze the HP orbs out of the Heartless. If not dealt with quickly, the Loudmouth's ability to call in reinforcements can become quite the problem, which especially shines in round 47 of the Hades Paradox Cup, where 5 of them appear next to the dangerous Morning Stars. All things considered, it's a fun Heartless with a creative moveset that forces the player to prioritize taking it down, all coming from a game which had no obligation to create any new Heartless in the first place. That's an A tier from me. Days introduced 2 members to the Loudmouth family, the Flare Note and the Bubble Beat. The Flare Note can shoot a bouncing fireball, and the Bubble Beat can shoot a homing water shot, and both of them retain their Bloodline's signature healing ability. While not incredibly interesting or creative, their relative rarity and curative capabilities make them a notch above other reskins. I personally prefer the Bubble Beat, since the Water Heartless appearing above Neverland Seas is more interesting than a Fire Heartless in Olympus Coliseum, but it's not enough to give it a higher spot in the rankings. High C tier for both. What if you painted a raindrop on the side of the Loudmouth? Yeah, I'm not gonna act like the rainy Loudmouth is incredible or anything, but I have a certain fondness for this little guy. Apparently, its ability was to inflict paralysis on its enemies. It goes here. The Loudmouth Parade takes the idea of the crescendo to its absolute limit. We have a giant elephant-like Loudmouth float with brass horns for ears, a drum master, a bunch of balloons including a cute inflatable shadow head, and an escort consisting of 2 Loudmouth trumpeters, 1 percussionist, and 1 flag bearer, all with cymbals for wheels. And of course, you can't forget the 2 adorable Heartless riding in the eyes. I asked for a Loudmouth and I received an entire marching band. It proudly goes in low A tier. The last of the Chain of Memories originals is the Tornado Step. It's one of those early Heartless designs where I have no idea what I'm looking at. It's weird and it's creative. Sadly, the Tornado Step's final mixed recolor makes Vexen look like Prince Charming. It's truly one of the ugliest things to ever grace this earth. Still, the Tornado Step is an incredibly fun Heartless that deserves its spot in low B tier. Somewhat surprisingly, the Tornado Step has 5 siblings. My favorite out of the bunch is the Terrible Tomta. It's an inoffensive Christmas reskin, but the tiny little gift shadow latching onto its bag is so adorable. The not-so-terrible Tomta takes its name from small creatures in Scandinavian folklore, more commonly known as Nissa, which are the basis for the modern garden gnome. Low B tier. The Eggster Bunny is an Easter-themed variant, and I don't have the same affection for this one. I suppose the tiny little Heartless hatching out of the eggs are pretty cute, so that'll save the Eggster Bunny from being dead average. C tier. The Warlock Step is the first sibling to originate in the mobile remake, and I find this thing profoundly ugly. I don't know what exactly about its design is unappealing, but it just doesn't fit together nicely. The Upright Warlock and Reversed Warlock tried to remedy this with a more unified color scheme, and while I can't say I'm a huge fan of their get-ups either, the Upright Reversed Metal Absorption gimmick is technically more than the bare minimum. Low C tier for the Warlock Step, but mid C tier for the Dawn and Dusk siblings.
It's okay, those were just the Heartless.
It's time to move on to Heartless families that got their start in the early hours of KH2. First up to bat is the Hook Bat, and they really pulled every stop when coming up with a name. This flying Heartless is a pretty weak enemy and appears in several worlds, though it's most strongly associated with Beast's Castle. I always enjoy using the Bat Cry reaction command to hitch a ride, but in most encounters the Hook Bat is little more than a distraction from the real fight. Low C tier. If you were paying attention in part 1, you'd remember that the Cavern of Remembrance reskins all ranked pretty low, and the Befuddler is no exception. At least this Heartless has an additional attack instead of just a new change of clothes, but it's a more forgettable version of an already mediocre Heartless. I guess its name is fun to say, Befuddler. D tier. At first glance, the Golden Hookbat seems to be in the same boat as its befuddling brother, but as far as Heartless reskins go, the Golden Hookbat is not the absolute worst. In Union Cross, it appears in the treasure rooms in the Cave of Wonders. Having a gold Heartless in the gold room might not be the most creative Heartless design, but I'll place the Golden Hookbat above the Befuddler to teach it a lesson. Low C tier. The Bad Dog was introduced in KH2 under the name Rabid Dog. Like the Hookbat, I associate the Bad Dog with Beast's Castle, that's actually only the case in Days. In KH2, Dark Road, and Melody of Memory, the Bad Dog is native to the underworld of Olympus Coliseum, perhaps as a reference to Cerberus. Regardless of its homeworld though, I don't find its design particularly compelling. A lot of the Kingdom Hearts 2 Heartless designs are, compared to KH1, more commonplace and less otherworldly. In my opinion, this makes them far less menacing and typically not as interesting. It also loses some of the charm and originality of the Heartless brand. This angry mutt could be an enemy in any RPG and it wouldn't feel out of place. The Bad Dog is, in fact, a bad dog. low C tier. The Snapper dog is going to go the way of the Befuddler. It's just a green bad dog with higher stats and lower resistances. In days, this Heartless is little more than Keyblade fodder. D tier. The Bully dog is more memorable than the Snapper dog, partly due to its size and strength, and partly due to its appearance as the target enemy in Mission 31 of Roxas That's a Stick fame. It also looks a bit too similar to the final mixed recolor of the Bad Dog. Like the rest of the litter, I consider the Bully dog to be a pretty boring Heartless, so it's not going any higher than the original. Low C tier. I can't believe this, but a Kingdom Hearts Key Holiday reskin is going to be the highest ranking member of the family. Introducing the Raging Reindeer, first appearing during Christmas 2014. The design is charming enough, and while I don't know if this was intentional, it keeps with the Beast Castle association from Days. See, a lot of the winter-themed events in Kingdom Hearts Union Cross took place in the cozy fireplace room or the various parts of the frozen forest, making Beast's Castle the de facto home of most Christmas Heartless. Anyway, the fact that I have anything at all to say about the Raging Reindeer has earned itself a spot above the rest of its family, even if it's not extraordinary. High C tier. This is the Rush Sheep, and it's an odd one. From what I can gather, it was introduced simultaneously in Kingdom Hearts Key and the Japanese version of Union Cross during the 2015 New Year's event celebrating the Year of the Sheep. However, the Rush Sheep never made the jump to international devices, making this Heartless a region exclusive. As for its ranking, I'd say it's more interesting and inspired than the Bad Dog, but not as charming as the Raging Reindeer, even though I love the Little Rider Heartless. C tier. The Possessor is a rare case of a boss from one game turning into a normal Mook Heartless in later games. Perhaps that's a bit inaccurate, since the real boss in KH2 is less so the Possessor and more so the Possessed. So let's talk about the Thresholder. As far as bosses go, a door with a cancerous growth isn't topping anyone's list for best design, and it's largely overshadowed by the other Heartless boss in Beast's Castle. Just mash X on a stationary target, and the encounter will be over before you know it. The only interesting thing about the fight is the fact that you have to exorcise the Possessor to deal any real damage, but it doesn't make fighting the door itself any less insipid. High C tier. The Possessor itself, on the other hand, I hold in far higher regard. The ability to take control of objects and turn them into Heartless is, at this point in the series, a unique gimmick, and it results in enemies that are natural fits for their environment. The Possessor's later appearances aren't nearly as engaging, I'll admit. In Days, the Possessor is the go-to pick for a weak flying pureblood, and while they're essentially just misty mosquitoes, it never becomes too irritating. In Union Cross, the Possessor is absolutely everywhere, appearing in every world except Candy Kingdom without much to show for itself. Despite this fall from grace, I think the original Possessor is conceptually interesting enough to earn a spot in high B tier. Now, what if you put 10 Possessors on screen at once and called it a new Heartless? This is the Possessors, or to literally translate its Japanese name, the Possessor Herd. When you take the least compelling iteration of the Possessor and Ctrl-C Ctrl-V 9 times, I can't be expected to care. This Heartless didn't try, and it didn't succeed. D tier. What the Sheltering Zone is to Sea Neons, the Massive Possessor is to the Possessor. When defeated, it splits apart into its smaller counterparts. It's hardly any more of a threat than the regular Possessor, but I like how it just sort of leeches Roxas's HP by floating around him, rather than having traditional attacks. It's an interesting enemy, and given that it's only in 4 missions, it doesn't become stale like the regular Possessor. Low B tier. The Possessor family also has 2 estranged siblings from the Key series, the Cloudy Sunrise and the Pink Possessor. Even though there's nothing to set them apart mechanically, I'm impressed by their ability to take a Heartless as visually basic as a Possessor and turn it into 2 very pretty enemies. I think the little tree on top of the Cloudy Sunrise is quite cute, and the Pink Possessor's whole getup is just very charming. Let this be a lesson to the rest of the Union Cross palette swaps. Just because we're reusing animations, it doesn't mean that we can't have fun and interesting designs. Low B tier. It's time for the Gargoyle family, the other Gargoyle family. In Kingdom Hearts 2, there are 2 members of this clan, the Gargoyle Knight and Gargoyle Warrior. It seems as though they are normal statues being controlled by a Possessor or Possessor-adjacent Heartless, but Union Cross and Melody of Memory group them in with ordinary Heartless. Either way, they have enough Heartless blood to be put on this tier list. As for where they fall, most of their points are coming from their habit to spawn from ordinary gargoyle props in the castle, which is like a more shocking version of the pot spider. These were legitimately startling on my first playthrough, and I imagine they scared many an 8-year-old back in 2006. In addition to this great theming, I'm giving them points for Sora's ability to perform an exorcism with the release reaction command. I will say, I prefer the Gargoyle Warrior over the Gargoyle Knight. There are fewer axe wielders than swordsmen, and the Warrior's axe throw and spinning move are both more memorable than any of the Knight's attacks. Neither one is ranking this high because of their moveset though. B tier for the Knight, and high B tier for the Warrior. Like the Sinister Sweets and Spiteful Sweets, the Chocolate Gargoyle and White Chocolate statue are a package deal inspired by Valentine's Day and White Day confections. I'm inclined to believe that these are ordinary Heartless rather than statues made out of solid chocolate that got possessed. The chocolate statue has a chocolate fountain at its base, while the white chocolate statue stands atop a stack of cookies. Both of them have Spirit of Strawberry and carry it as a weapon. Remind me to never invite these guys to a round of fruit ball. Anyway, these two Heartless' designs can only carry them so far based on their appearance in the original Kingdom Hearts key, but they were refitted as Candy Kingdom natives in the Union Cross endgame. I'm a big fan of redeeming old designs by giving them new contexts, and the visuals are pretty solid, so these two can earn a spot in low B tier. The Gargoyle Wizard was made for Enchanted Dominion's inclusion in Union Cross. It has the green and black dark magic aesthetic that's signature to Maleficent's homeworld, and the Gargoyle facade fits just as well with Maleficent's castle as it does the Beast's. It's nothing next level, but to me it's a worthy addition to the family. Low B tier again. At long last, it's time to discuss a Heartless introduced in Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, the Earth Gargoyle. While its physical sprite is based on the Gargoyle Wizard, the visuals are more in line with the Gargoyle Warrior, albeit more intimidating. It doesn't have the benefit of environmental camouflage like its KH2 predecessors, but it makes up for it in other areas. In case you didn't play Dark Road or just forgot what happened, the Earth Gargoyle is introduced as something of a mini-boss, and its stats are indeed formidable. It's the only enemy I remember having any trouble with during my initial playthrough. After taking one down, you're shown a scene where Erd is surrounded by 8 of these frighteningly strong Heartless. She understands that she's pitifully outnumbered and prepares to make her final stand. And just as things are getting dire, Vala hops down and takes out all the Earth Gargoyles with a single badass faith spell. Because of the way Dark Road approaches death, the Earth Gargoyles are a legitimate threat, and the moment helps demonstrate the power difference between the underclassmen and upperclassmen. My love for Dark Road is definitely carrying this one on the rankings, but I'm okay with that. Low A tier. KH3's answer to the Possessor is the Marionette, a spiritual Possessor successor in form and function. I personally consider it a subspecies of Possessor, since the dark blob on top is far too similar to be called a coincidence. These Toy Box natives fit right in with their environment, and their design is the right amount creepy and charming. The Marionette isn't particularly hard to eliminate, but they will possess the various toys of the world if you leave them alone, which can become a bigger issue. If you defeat any one of the Marionette's possessed playthings, Angelic Amber included, it counts for a Marionette kill in the journal, which is a fantastic attention to detail. I also think the spinning ring attack is cute. Unlike the original Possessor, its legacy has yet to be tarnished by handheld and mobile sequels, so the Marionette lands itself a spot in low A tier. As for the toys that the Marionette possesses, they are pretty hit or miss. We'll start with the misses. Beasts and Bugs is a strong contender for the most forgettable enemy in KH3 and perhaps the series. Most players will encounter this toy once during the Force Mob fight in the Kid Corral, where only a single one of them spawns, and then never again. Chances are you won't even notice it from inside a Gigas. It's not like you're missing out on anything though, since this enemy has a grand total of 1 attack, where it fires a projectile that anyone with a pulse can react to. The entry in Jiminy's journal lampshades this straightforward design, but it doesn't change the fact that Beasts and Bugs is one of the most boring enemies in the entire series. D tier. On paper, the air droids are more interesting, but it's a game of inches. Instead of 1 basic projectile attack, these toys have 1 basic projectile attack and a big fan. That's where the 6 years of development time went. The air droids also have 3 different colors, none of which you remember. The only noteworthy thing is that Square Enix had to include a line in the credits that say, "The term air droid used with permission of Lucasfilm Ltd. Insert joke about a Star Wars world here. This terrible toy is getting blasted off to D tier. The Patchwork Animals have a simple game plan. Slowly approach Sora before attacking with a quick rush and stay far away from fire. It is the atmosphere that carries them to the upper half of the tier list. They start out as normal plushies in the environment before they get Marionorted, and I think the Possessed Toys gimmick really helps the more interesting Toy Box enemies synergize with the world and story. Instead of the lion and panda, imagine your favorite childhood plushie turned into a creepy floating monster. For me, an IKEA Barnsley crocodile named Hungry. I think I'd run the other way, but the Patchwork Animals can run straight to the low B tier. The Bouncy Pets come in 6 variants: dog, cat, cow, pig, elephant, and frog. Like the Patchwork Animals, they appear in Galaxy toys before being possessed, and they act as a flow motion point to bounce off of. Once possessed, they repeat a squash attack that produces a large shockwave, which can be something of a serious threat in the right circumstances. This barnyard can go right up to the middle of B tier. Up next is the Toy Box Terror, the Plastic Punisher, your favorite and mine, the Supreme Smasher. These toys are one of the strongest non-boss enemies in KH3, with several massive ranged and melee attacks that will leave you crying on the floor of Galaxy toys as you piece your LEGO minifigure pieces back together and crawl back towards Battlegate 5. Their jerky and erratic movements are unsettling, giving the impression that this toy is doing something unnatural, which, to be clear, it is. The Supreme Smasher might be the root of many a death for first-time players or challenge runners, but its design and complexity is enough to place this intimidating foe in high B tier. The last of the Marionette's playthings is Angelic Amber, and I love that we have her as the mid-world boss instead of some random forgettable Heartless. Her movements are erratic and unnatural, serving as a creepy contrast to her cute and childish looks. Her attacks are strange and unsettling, though I'm left wanting more given that she only has 3 moves in her arsenal. As an extra creepy touch, she just goes limp for several seconds once you've reduced her HP by a third. The atmosphere of the battle is incredible, and even though it may be a challenge runner's bane, I'm content with giving Miss Onyx a seat in the high B tier. That was a fun diversion, but we need to get back to the Heartless families from Kingdom Hearts 2. And by that, I mean the Heartless family with 1 enemy from KH2 and 9 descendants from the mobile games. This is the Rapid Thruster. Known for making up the least intimidating Hun army in history, these tiny helicopters are a very basic breed of airborne Heartless. On their own, they're not worth a second thought, but the Rapid Thrusters often appear in massive waves. Even though most of the Heartless are cardboard cutouts that don't participate in the battle until the currently loaded thrusters are defeated, the visual of the Heartless swarm is quite memorable. I especially like how one of these huge waves appears at the peak where Scar is fought, since the player is never required to revisit the area. It's an exciting discovery, and sometimes you just want the feedback from mashing X and tearing through tiny Heartless bones. That said, when you look at the Heartless itself, neither of its 2 attacks are worth another sentence, and as funny as its appearance in the Land of Dragon is, I think its silly design undermines Shan Yu's introduction and prevents him from being recognized as a real threat. Put it all together, and you have a new resident of the high C tier. Kingdom Hearts Key presents a more industrialized redesign of the Rapid Thruster, the Gummicopter. Or I should say, the Gummicopters, since there are way too many of these things. There are 4 main variants, red, yellow, blue, and black, each of which drop gummy blocks of their respective color during special gummy events. The black variant is slightly rarer than the others, but regardless of the color, these things absolutely litter the Union Cross early game. For example, the red Gummicopter appears once in every 5 missions over the first 400 story quests. These things are simply Keyblade fodder with a fairly basic design. Low C tier all around. Of course, we're not done yet. There are another 4 members of the family that are even more disappointing than the Gummicopters, the Copter Fleets. As with the other copy-pasted enemies, their Japanese name is slightly different. On the other side of the Pacific, the Copter Fleet is called the Gummy Squad, and the basic Gummicopter is known as the Gummy Thruster, calling back to the Rapid Thruster these Heartless were based on. Now, could you tell that I don't actually have anything to say about these Heartless? D tier for all 4 of these failures. This is the colorful Copter Fleet. I don't know what to tell you. I'm ranking it separately because it was introduced a full year after the monochromatic fleets, but it is precisely as interesting as the last time they decided to merge 9 PNGs in Photoshop. D tier. We have one more family tree to cover in this part, and that's the hammer frames. The original breed isn't much to write home about. It's a big hammer with a face, and that's basically it. It can spin, it can hit the floor, but it can't find its way any higher than low C tier. Next up is Sigurd, as in Sigurd Stark, aka Stark Odinson, aka the Iron Hammer. And yes, sharing a name with a C-list Marvel superhero is the most interesting thing about this Cavern of Remembrance reskin. I guess the render pose is funny, it kinda looks like it's breakdancing. D tier. What if we made our tools out of increasingly impractical metals? Such is the folly that led to the silver hammer frame and gold hammer frame. Their designs are a bit busy, but I like the addition of a screw near their helm. And once again, I'm out of things to say about these filler Heartless. Low C tier it is. Now we're talking. Easily the best of its lineage by a country mile, the brick hammer frame is exclusive to Niceland. This construction-themed Heartless is gonna wreck it. I can't really think of a better fit for the buildings and brick piles of Ralph's world. Every inch of its design is adorably rectangular, sort of like a Minecraft mob. B tier.
There's hardness in every part of the castle.
With the major families out of the way, let's touch on some of the standalone enemy types. The Assault Rider is one of the first new Heartless you encounter in KH2, only being found in the Land of Dragons. It can be a pretty decent threat in the early game. The Assault Rider has a pretty fleshed out moveset with 5 different attacks. I find the Windmill Flourish move to be particularly memorable. While I don't condone its appearance in the insufferable mission segment of the world, I must admit that this is a well-designed Heartless. B tier. The Nightwalker is a strange creature. Another resident of the Land of Dragons, the Nightwalker is ostensibly a blend of Western vampire folklore and the Jiangshi of Chinese mythology, also known as the Chinese hopping vampire. If I had a nickel for every time a classic 2005 PS2 game that was the 3rd entry in its series had a China level starting with a callback to a character from the first game where you fought against enemies inspired by Chinese hopping vampires, I'd be at least 10 cents richer. Anyway, the Nightwalker has a unique spawn animation in which a piece of parchment is lit in a blue flame, which causes the Heartless to rise from its robes. The theming here is off the charts, and they have a decent amount of attack variety to boot. They also appear in the Shan Yu fight trying to break down the palace gates, a gimmick I never felt contributed much to the encounter. Despite all of this, I think the Nightwalker is one of the most forgettable enemies in the game, but I will acquiesce to a spot in B tier. Let's stick with the undead theme and talk about the Trick Ghost. If you remember from part 1, the Trick Ghost is the only Heartless name to be reused in the entire series. This here is the original, available in Spooky White and Jolly Rancher Green. In its grounded state, the Trick Ghost uses close-range attacks, and it can flip itself upside down to get access to additional range techniques. In practice, this form change is not nearly as impactful as it seems, since the Trick Ghost is never much of a threat. Its spooky look does fit in nicely with the Underworld and Halloween Town, so I'll rate the Trick Ghost as a bit better than average. Low B tier. Breaking news, Cavern of Remembrance clone ranked higher than original Heartless. Yes, you heard me right, the Trick Ghost is, in my opinion, outclassed by its final mix counterpart, the Magic Phantom. The gimmick of flipping between forms is taken to its extreme. While grounded, the Heartless is immune to magic attacks and weak to physical attacks, while when flipped upside down, it is immune to physical damage but susceptible to magic. I'm on record to be a fan of any Heartless that encourages the player to come up with a unique strategy or change their approach to combat, and even though it's not the most out there gimmick, it certainly is an effective one. When it appears alongside other Heartless, the Magic Phantom's immunities can be a real problem on the battlefield, so it forces the player to put at least some thought into their attacks. Low A tier. Hop aboard, it's time for the aeroplane. As I've said before, the KH2 enemies based on ordinary objects don't usually capture that Heartless feel, and the aeroplane is no exception. Its only redeeming quality is its first appearance in the Lilliput of Timeless River. The imagery of small planes attacking a minuscule town is, like everything else in the world, charming. Still, I can't really say that I get much joy out of this Heartless. C tier. The aeroplane's only relative is the Guild Glider, known in Japan as the Corpse Streamer. This Heartless was made for Boys' Day in 2014, a Japanese public holiday that involves decorating and flying corpse streamers. A dark blue streamer traditionally represents the son of a family. I have something of a soft spot for Heartless that are infused with Japanese cultural traditions. A design like the Guild Glider is miles better than a simple recolor. Still, I can't place it any higher than C tier. From sky to ground, it's time for everyone's favorite, the Hot Rod. I'm truly torn on this Heartless. I'm not sure whether to give it a high ranking for succeeding at what it wanted to do, or a low ranking because what it wanted to do is be an asshole. As I'm sure you're well aware, once the Hot Rod is at half health, it will spam its flip dash technique, or it becomes invincible to melee attacks and charges at high speeds. While a well-timed counter or reflect magic can fend off this attack, the Hot Rod didn't earn its reputation as one of the most annoying cage enemies for nothing. From a design standpoint, while I've lampooned the object-based Heartless several times in this video, I actually like the Hot Rod's looks. More than its contemporaries, it captures the wacky and cartoony feel of Timeless River. I love when it stands up on its hind legs and uses its wheels to box, that's just pure whimsy. So, despite the popular opinion and my better judgment, I'm going to give the Hot Rod a modest spot in high C tier. I have no such patience for the Mad Ride, the Cavern of Remembrance counterpart with the Guy Fieri makeover. The only difference between the two is the Mad Ride's higher stats and quicker attack speed. Well, it also has a fire immunity and blizzard vulnerability, but I'm too busy getting ping-ponged around by this hunk of junk to notice. When I see this wheeled menace, I know I'm not going to have fun until it's decommissioned. Because it's optional, the Mad Ride doesn't have the notoriety of the Hot Rod, but it also doesn't have the Timeless River charm. It's just the most annoying parts of the base game version without the novelty. F tier. Up next is the Bolt Tower. I've always seen it as something as a counterpart to the Rapid Thruster, a weird cross between a normal mob and a special event Heartless. The Bolt Tower is most notable for appearing in the mini escort sequence and the force encounter in the first Land of Dragons visit. I can't say I'm wowed by its design or moveset, but I really like the Land of Dragons regional variant. That's one of the only times a world other than Timeless River, Halloween Town, or Space Paranoids has its own local Heartless design. For that, I'm giving the Bolt Tower a spot in C tier. Before I started gathering footage, I was absolutely prepared to write off the Land Soldier as a boring addition to the cast. But I've come to realize that this Heartless is just a funny little guy. It chases after its own weapon, even getting dragged around the battlefield as the lance flies around. It has a spin attack, but it gets really dizzy afterward and has to regain its bearings. If it misses its thrust attack, it bonks itself on the head and drops prizes. This is so charming. In a sense, this duo is an offensive counterpart to the Defender, since the weapon seems to be a separate entity and the one truly in control. Even if I miss the more abstract, otherworldly Heartless of the previous games, KH2 certainly has its wins, and the Lance Soldier is unexpectedly one of them. Low B tier. Lance Warrior. Cavern of Remembrance. Stronger stats. Minor color change. Zero reason to care. D tier. Like many of the Candy Kingdom designs, the Noble Soldier is heading to the top of the tier list. Its helmet and pauldrons are transformed into whisks, and its lance is now a piping bag, which is just so perfect. This is a fun and well-themed Heartless design from top to bottom, and its placing will reflect that. B tier. Rounding off the early game enemies is the Shadow Stalker. I love this Heartless. When the fight begins, it runs away into the walls of the arena. From this point on, the fight isn't against some dripped out dark ball, but the entirety of the ballroom. You can send waves of energy from the windows, drop and spin the chandelier, or lash out with the pillars around the room. To deal any damage, you'll have to identify what the Shadow Stalker's possessing, then knock it out with the release command just like the Possessor. In this way, I think the Shadow Stalker is a fully realized version of the Thresholder fight, just with the grand Beauty and the Beast set piece instead of some random door. The battle has this perfect dose of environmental interaction, transforming an otherwise flat and empty arena into a creative encounter where danger lurks around every corner. What's more, I'm not just mashing X the whole time, you actually have to dodge and drive out the Shadow Stalker to move the fight forward. No notes from me, this encounter is excellent. For the first time in KH2, S tier. Even in death, the Shadow Stalker continues to excel, since from its corpse rises the Dark Thorn. I absolutely adore the design of this boss. Few Heartless in KH2, or really the entire series, are as beastly and intimidating as the Dark Thorn. It has the rose and thorn motif that ties it to the Disney world, plus the large body special of the broken wrist cuffs. I don't know about you, but I'm afraid of whatever was strong enough to chain this thing up in the first place. Funny though that I love its visual design, since the first thing it does after the fight begins is turn invisible. You get to see how ferocious the Dark Thorn is for a split second, only to be left powerless and afraid when it disappears from sight. And to make it reappear, you have to use a reaction command that perfectly turns the tables from the first phase. This time, we're using the environment to attack. Everything about the encounter feels very thoroughly thought out, and I can't get enough of it. In all parts of its design, the Dark Thorn is a phenomenal beast. High S tier.
The Heartless had already shattered the walls between worlds.
When I said I was ranking every Heartless, I meant every Heartless, and that includes gummy ships. The gummy enemies in the first Kingdom Hearts are just Heartless piloting normal gummy ships, but the ones in Kingdom Hearts 2 have unique designs in the Heartless emblem, which means we have to rank them. Granted, the majority of hostile ships are nobodies, which leaves only 8 enemies to consider. As someone who never really cared about KH2 gummy segments, to wit, making this video was literally the first time I've ever used the Gummy Garage, I was surprised by how distinct the Gummy Heartless were. I was prepared to label them all as boring and forgettable, but it turns out they're only somewhat boring and mostly forgettable. Starting on a low note, it's the Dragonfly. It's just a little pest. It zips around and fires homing bullets, but it fails to cross the border from mild nuisance to interesting challenge. As far as the design is concerned, I adore the tiny little Heartless that is piloting the ship, but outside of that it's pretty forgettable. Low C tier. For something better, let's turn to the submarine. Only appearing in Splash Island, this Heartless pops out of the water to fire ring-shaped projectiles. The fact that it is confined to one route and is heavily themed with the aquatic environment makes it a big step up. The shape of the projectiles means that you can choose to stay still to avoid them, which is mildly interesting. Once again, the piloting Heartless is adorable, though the overall design is a bit basic. I think as far as Gummy Heartless go, the submarine is an inoffensive pick. High C tier. The Driller focuses on physical attacks and is very bulky, with the red and gold versions being even stronger, but isn't quite powerful enough to be considered a mini-boss. It almost only appears in higher level Gummy missions, which explains why I have almost no memory of or feelings towards this Heartless. The design is also pretty generic, but I can't shake the picture of Drill Sergeant from Skylanders whenever I see it. I suppose I appreciate the existence of a melee-oriented spaceship, so I'll say C tier. The Crawler is just a big little guy, and I love him. This lad is exclusive to the floating island route, and he's just vibing. What more could you ask for? B tier for my beautiful tortoise boy. It's time for Gummy bosses, starting with the pirate ship. Probably the most memorable Gummy enemy in KH2, this massive Heartless guards the way to Olympus Coliseum. The entire Gummy route is just circling around the pirate ship and hacking away at its components, eventually fighting it head-on. It's an interesting shake-up to the Gummy formula, although the gameplay itself leaves me whelmed at best. I'll also take a second to point out the Ghost, Ghoul, and Cannonball, all of which have their own little faces. In Kingdom Hearts 3, you can see the ruins of the pirate ship fittingly relocated to outside of the Caribbean, which is a nice touch. High B tier. The Reaper's Wheel is cool, man. You enter the Gummy mission and the guitars of Hazardous Highway start blaring like an F-Zero track, and this giant wheel rolls up in a racetrack that's in space for some reason. It's hype in a way that no other Gummy route can capture, even if Shimomura is doing the heavy lifting. As you fly by, the Reaper's Wheel tries to ram your Gummy ship, but can be knocked back and eventually killed with enough firepower. Sure, it might literally be a big wheel, but it's the coolest big wheel this side of the broken highway. B tier. The Hunter has 4 varieties of increasing power, but they all look the same. The weaker ones are whatever, but the stronger ones are a decent threat. When the final Hunter is on screen, bullets are the question, and the answer is yes. I have no idea what's going on here, but I'm kind of hyped because of it. Stronger varieties of the Hunter also have 4 support Heartless called the Hunter Bombs, which drop HP orbs when defeated. I don't really remember the Hunter once the Gummy route is over, but for the spectacle of the fight, I'm giving the Hunter a high C tier. And spectacle is taken to the max with the Gummy super boss, the Hunter X. It only appears at the end of the level 3 Assault of the Dreadnought mission. In levels 1 and 2, the mission would end after the Dreadnought had been sufficiently assaulted, but the Hunter X crashes through the level end keyhole and takes us to a disturbing landscape for the final showdown. With the amount of projectiles on screen, the battle is complete nonsense to look at, but again, spectacle. I'm not really a fan of the fight, partly since I'm not willing to grind other gummy missions to make a better ship, and partly since placing a difficult super boss at the end of a 4-minute auto-scroller is a horrible idea. Nearly every video I've found of someone beating the Hunter X is done with a hollow gummy ship designed to cheese enemy attacks, so I think the general player base is of a similar mind. Still, the visuals are engaging enough to earn a spot in low B tier. We're nearing the end, so it's time for a quiz. Out of every Heartless we discussed today, which is the only one to have a gummy ship blueprint in Kingdom Hearts 3? The answer is the Hot Rod. I'm not sure why it was chosen, but I suppose it is among the most memorable KH2 enemies, for better or for worse. Real quick, I want to make 2 minor adjustments to my KH1 tier list. This soldier was one of the very first Heartless I ranked, so now that my ranking system has gotten some more structure, this iconic enemy feels a bit underserved. I'm bumping the soldier up from high C tier to mid B tier. Conversely, the Phantom is getting demoted from low S tier to high A tier. The battle has too much downtime, and I find myself getting tired of the fight while replaying KH1. And that wraps up part 1 of the KH2 rankings. Like last time, I'm splitting the endgame Heartless into their own video in order to get this out in a reasonable time frame. I'll save my commentary on this era of Heartless for the end of part 2, so we'll finish this video with one final look at the KH2 tier list so far.